Well, guys, we are dead in the middle of the college football offseason. I know. It sucks. It's painful. We're only at the beginning of it. It's going to get worse, but we're going to be all right. You know why? Because we're going to keep talking about Aggie football throughout the ups and the downs of the offseason, the slow times, the busy times, spring, the doldrums of summer. We'll get through it, guys. But we do have spring around the corner. It's about a month and a half out. I want to talk about some players. I want to talk about the field. I want to talk about what we might see. Of course, Mike Elko's been hard at work for his first couple of months and a half at the helm at Texas A&M. He's put together a coaching staff. He's put together a huge group of 23 transfer players. He's put together a signing class. He's done a lot. We've talked about it. We know he's been doing great. Right now, I want to predict my starting 11 for the offensive and the defensive side of the ball in spring. This is based on the knowledge we have now. Of course, after spring, we're going to get rumblings, we're going to get reports, we're going to get the spring MVPs, we're going to learn more about this team. But going into it, only with the players that Mike Elko has acquired in his early time and the players that he has retained on this roster going into next year, I want to list the starting 11. Because I live in Saturdays in fall. Even in the offseason, my priority is always looking forward to the games. So we're going to look forward to spring. But first, guys, if you could like and subscribe to this channel, that would help me greatly. I'm trying to continue to grow this thing to produce content throughout the offseason. If things slow down, I'm sorry. I need to be inspired. I need to feel like I'm putting out a good product before I just make a video for you guys. So if they become less frequent, that's why. I have to think about things, decide what I want to make. But the live show will happen every week. Right now, it's at Thursdays at 8 p.m. It's subject to change based on my schedule. It'll lock up throughout the regular season, but over the offseason, it's subject to change. But for this week and the foreseeable future, Thursdays, 8 p.m., live show. Call in. Let's talk Aggie or college football. So, guys, let's get into these starting lineups. Okay, so as you can see, I've already listed everything out, and you could just look at what I think and leave the video, but I'm going to quickly go through all these positions real quick. I'm not trying to give you a depth chart here, but I want to add some context to a couple of different positions. That's why I have multiple names and slashes and everything on this page. We'll go through it. So let's start with the offensive side of the ball. And what you're going to notice is on the offensive side of the ball, there are going to be a lot of familiar names in a lot of familiar places. On the defensive side of the ball, not so much. You had a bunch of holes, a bunch of changes, a bunch of new names, new players, whether it's from within, further back in the depth chart, or players who were on different teams last year. But offensively, at quarterback, it starts with Connor Wigman. I've been saying, I think for this team to reach its ceiling, to win 9, 10, 11 games next year, Connor Wigman needs to be damn near a Heisman contender. If you were to put an impact player moniker on any player on this offense, it would go under Connor Wigman going into next year. If you don't know what that means, if you played NCAA football games, the new ones coming out this year, confirmed, the best star player on offense and defense get a little star under their name. They have extra attributes. They can do extra fancy things on the field. They're the ones you rely on. Connor Wigman has to be a star because when I look at this group of names here of offensive players, there are a lot of promising guys. Ja'Day Walker, Reuben Owens, Le'Veon Moss. These guys could become stars. But what I know going into 2024 is that Connor Wigman already is that. He can go into the season as the guy. Other guys, I need to see it happen first. But Connor, I'm expecting it to happen. So I'm saying if Connor's healthy, he's starting in spring. But the reason I have multiple names here, if he's not healthy, it would be Henderson starting. Jalen Henderson, of course, had a significant shoulder injury or arm injury, I forget which, in the Oklahoma State game. I don't think he's going to play in spring. So if Connor can't go, I think it's Marcel Reed, who we know is really promising and up and coming as your third string quarterback in 2024. He had a great game versus Oklahoma State. He had the most passing yards we've seen in a game from an Aggie, I think, the whole year. He showed a lot of promise, and he was very unexpectedly impressive in the game. Moving over to the running back position, the reason I have Le'Veon Moss as the third string and not as the first string, because I've said time and time again, I think Le'Veon Moss is the future of the running back position. I think he's had some off-the-field issues over the offseason, the short duration of the offseason so far. He's posted some weird things on social media. We've had some weird messages from coaches. I think E-Rob said after Moss was absent from the bowl game that we need to keep him in our prayers, him and his family in our prayers. I don't know what that means. Might have something going on. So I have a feeling he's either not going to play in spring or he's going to be at the tail end of it. I don't know if he's playing or not in spring, so redact that. I think Ruben Owens is your starting player. I think Ruben Owens has been the most consistent producer outside of, avoiding injuries, being able to stay on the field the most, with the best future, I guess, based on his age and his gradual improvement over the course of the year last year. I think with improved offensive line play, Ruben Owens could have a great spring and a great 2024. But I think he's the first one we see on the field in spring. And then Amari Daniels, I think, backs him up. If Le'Veon Moss plays, I think he's third string. I don't think he's on maroon. I don't think he's a maroon starter or a white starter, whatever the structure is for spring. I think he's the third running back we're going to see. And then EJ Smith, he's obviously going to play in spring. You only have 4 scholarship guys. So there's a damn good chance EJ Smith actually finds a place in a rotation next year, especially if something happens with Le'Veon Moss. I don't think we're in the clear with Le'Veon. I think there's the chance he transfers in spring. Just a gut feeling based on evidence, no inside info. That's just my guess. But regardless, if Moss is here, if Moss goes, I think EJ Smith has a chance to play. At wide receiver, I think you have a really high ceiling here. I think of all the guys that came back, of all the receivers we have coming back next year, of all the guys we saw play last year, I think Ja'Day Walker has to be your number 1 receiver going into 2024. He improved and got better and better over the course of the year last year. While the offensive line had a really rough year, while you had instability at the quarterback position, while you had receivers in front of him and he was not the favorite going into the year for the most snaps, he ended up being the best player by the bowl game. He was the best receiver. So I'm putting him as your wide receiver 1, as your go-to guy. That's why I listed him on the far left of this wide receiver group. I think Moose Muhammad is second behind, and he's not far behind. Moose Muhammad, I don't know what happened with him and Jimbo. I don't know if there was conspiracies about sleeves or him being in Jimbo's doghouse because of sleeves or whatever happened. Moose Muhammad has to freaking play. He's your playmaker. You have to feed the freaking studs. Feed the studs. Do what Bobby wanted to do. I think we're going to see that this year. I think Moose Muhammad has a huge role in this offense next year. And then Noah Thomas. Talk about a high ceiling. I think this guy has as high a ceiling as any player on this offense. Can he stay healthy? Spring MVP last year. They don't just give those out. Those aren't just out of every corner like Girl Scout cookies. You have to earn that. By reports, Noah Thomas was the best player on the offense last spring. And we saw it in game 1, and we saw it at times throughout the year last year. We just didn't see it consistently. But I think Noah Thomas starts in spring if he's healthy. And I'll throw the caveat out now. I don't know if I mentioned it before. A lot of caution with injuries in spring. Keep that in mind. So you never know if they're going to be careful with somebody and not play them in spring due to small injuries. So you never know if these guys are just going to not play because of injury. So that might happen. At tight end, I think Donovan Green's the starter if he's healthy enough to play. It's simple as that. I think he's your starter. I think he's your best tight end. I think he's a leader on this team. If he's not healthy, I think Theo Melon-Orstrom's your starter. I think he brings back the most experience. Here at Texas A&M, they really tried to force the issue with him last year. He started some games. He was in the first lineup for A&M in the first series of games last year. They wanted to get him involved. But I think he still has some deficiencies he's working through. Remember, he's a year younger than his grade. He's going to be a junior, but he's the age of a sophomore. He declared early. He was coming from overseas, big adjustment, but they still wanted to give him looks. So I still feel like there's some Theo left in the chamber. I think that he might have a path to some productivity next year, but he's got to work on some things. If Theo doesn't make it, or even if Theo does make it, I think Platt has a chance to be a serious player. I'm very excited about him. We obviously saw him score last year. We saw him in action. Big player, smart guy. I think he's the kind of guy that can earn playing time. And then, of course, you can't forget about the transfers. I think they're on the outside looking in this rotation, but if Donovan's not healthy, they have a chance. Trey Watson out of Fresno State was poised for a big season going into next year after some departures at receiver for them. He ended up transferring to A&M after only a couple hundred yards receiving last year. I believe his year was derailed by an injury. And then you have Garrett Miller coming out of Purdue. Similar type of year. Both guys who on paper should be really good players, but I think they're on the outside looking in on the tight end room. I think you have a solid trio right here. But if for some reason Dono's not healthy, Theo doesn't pan out, either one of those guys have the physicality, the build, the mold on paper, could become solid tight ends at Texas A&M. But this is what's most likely right now. That's how I'm leaving it now as my predicting starters in order of most likely. Donovan, Theo, Platt. I'm listing multiple names here. I know it's kind of like a cop-out, but I think there's some context that needed to be added here. Donovan's hurt, might not play. Theo, we think he's going to progress, but if he doesn't, I'm really confident in Platt. I put it that way. At offensive line, from left to right, I think Zune was the only offensive line player to not regress last year. I think he had a solid year. I did not complain about him. The problem with offensive linemen is if the entire offensive line is bad, no individual player really gets highlighted. The whole O-line is bad, so you're a bad O-line, you're a bad O-lineman. That's what you're going to get from afar. But I think Zune only gave up 2 or 3 sacks last year. He was solid in run blocking. He didn't have a lot of penalties. He didn't make a lot of mistakes. And he was one of the most reliable guys out there. So look for him to have a major statement kind of a year at left tackle next year, especially if we think there's going to be an upgrade in coaching going from Adazio to Adam Cushing, which I think there will be, just based on the regression. So let's take a second to talk about the regression in a second. So I have Dewberry, Naboo, Basantis, Crownover. And of course, Crownover is kind of a significant name. Basantis sliding over to right guard. I think Crownover, he's been a long-term project guy. I think this is where you actually finally get your payout on that project and Crownover becomes a starter. That's my prediction. Of course, you have a couple of transfers that can go in there and play too. So let's talk quickly about the Steve Adazio era at Texas A&M. And this is something I had just thought of while I was making this video. And I just wanted to put it out there. So 2021 to 2022. You had some very promising players in Bryce Foster, Layden Robinson, Reuben Fothery. They all had solid 2021s, especially Foster, especially Fothery versus Bama. Those guys were solid, and you felt good about your offensive line going forward. The next year, 2022, of course, you had issues across the board that year, but those players all regressed. You had Cam Dewberry kind of rise later in the year, became a very promising player. I think by the end of the year, I was calling him maybe the best offensive lineman in the second half of 2022. Well, guess what? From 2022 to 2023, he regressed. Of course, Foster got hurt, came back in 23, didn't have the best year that we were hoping for last year. Everybody just kind of regressed across the board under Steve Adazio. But here's the thing. By now, all of these guys are extremely experienced, even the young Chase Basantis, and now he's moving back into his natural position at guard. I think there's a chance this offensive line improves a ton. Based on the amount of experience you have, based on the change of coaching, based on the change of offensive scheme where these guys are going to be asked to run around a lot more, they're going to be pulling a lot more, doing a lot more counter pulls under Colin Klein, with a whole new outlook from the coach that they have now in Adam Cushing. A logical, down-to-earth, not so old-school kind of guy like Adazio, who's like a blue-collar yeller type. Maybe that works for some, but it wasn't working at A&M. I think this O-line, as what you see right here, maybe with Foster starting at center instead of Naboo. Of course, Foster's not going to practice in spring, most likely due to track. I think if you put the same 5 out there, you move Basantis inside, you move Crown over to right tackle, I think you have a damn good chance to see improvement. Anything's better than what we've seen the last couple of years. I'm excited about the experience. I'm excited about the change of outlook in the coaching staff. That was wordy, but we're moving on. Defensive side of the ball. Like I mentioned earlier, this is where you're going to see the most changes. Let's get right into it. Defensive line. Nick Scorton, I think on paper you would call him an edge. You wouldn't call him an edge rusher. You would call him a defensive end, a strong side defensive end. But coming in as the leading sack man of the Big Ten, he has an edge rusher's capability at a strong side defensive end's body. 6'4", 280, 10 sacks, can move around. You can move him inside. He can rush the quarterback. I think on first and second down, typically, unless it's a clear passing situation, Nick Scorton's your edge guy. I think he's just that good of a player. So you have him, and next to him you have Shamar Turner, who I believe is moving inside next year. I think he's upwards of 300 pounds now. Based on a glimpse we got from like behind-the-scenes locker room video from the player, I think he mentioned in passing that he's a 300-pounder now. I mean, damn. He's grown a lot. I don't know if that's true, but he's big enough to play inside, and I think he plays inside under Elko. At the other defensive tackle position, that's where things get interesting. I think the favorite right now would be DJ Hicks. If I had to bet, I'd say DJ Hicks is starting next to Shamar Turner next year. He was very promising. Almost every time we saw him for a drive, he made something happen last year. But Albert Regis has played a lot over the last couple of years. He seems like a leader. He seems like the kind of guy that might be able to take a big step now that he's been in the system or in the college football world for a couple of years. And of course, you have Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy here, who had all the talent in the world coming out of high school. Got hurt his freshman year. Who knows if he can make a name for himself at this point. I think any of those three guys can start, but if I had to bet, I'd say DJ Hicks is your starter. Rodis Johnson, I think, is a key pickup in the transfer portal, though. I know he's not a starter. I'm not projecting him as a starter at all, and this is a starting lineup video. But I want to mention him because he really rounds out the end of your rotation. Because look at this. I mean, and at the other defensive end position, let's just get to it. I have Shamar Stewart. I think he was a hair away from being a star last year. I think he's right there, like a half second away from getting to the quarterback, getting home on pressures last year. I think he was hurrying the quarterback last year. He made impact all over the field last year, but he was just a step away from being that major star player. I think he can take that step next year. I think he projects as the starter at the other defensive end position. What's interesting is how diverse and versatile this rotation can be, because there are guys here I haven't even listed yet. And this, of course, this is not a rotation video, but how can I mention the defensive line without talking about like third down packages and short yardage packages? On third down, you can move Nick Scorton inside. You can have Shamar Turner inside. Both of those guys rushing the passer from the interior. You can bring in a Cassius Howell, the transfer out of Bowling Green, who had 10 sacks on the year last year. A true edge build. I believe he's 6'4", 230, long-armed. This guy can get to the quarterback. At the other defensive end position on third downs, you throw out their Ian I. White. You throw out their Malik Silla. The only knock on those guys has been their physicality, their size, but now that they've been in the college weight room for going on 3 years now, those guys might be ready to make consistent impacts on games. So I'm thinking of third down packages much like Michael Clemens, Tyree Johnson, DeMarvin Leal. Those guys, the way those guys were able to move around and really just get after it on third downs, I'm looking at a crew like that to kind of form with this collection of players at defensive line next year. Now this is where things get a little wild. Linebacker, it's half and half. Torrin York's the starter. There's no need to overthink that. He called plays last year. It seems like after I've been talking to people and thinking about things, he really freed up Edge Cooper to just go out there and go play, with Jimbo talking about how time and time again York is ahead of his years in his ability to call plays, to lead a defense. I think he took that out of the other linebackers, whether it was Chris Russell or Edge Cooper's hands, and made them both better by taking that leadership mantle. Next to him, you could see a bunch of different guys. You could see a freshman. You could see a Jernigan become the starter. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if you saw a Lockhart become a starter. It wouldn't surprise me if you saw someone else from within who's been around for a while, like a Damian Sanford. Wouldn't surprise me if you saw Montrell Harris. You could see a Scooby Williams, the transfer out of Florida, and I think he might be my second most likely to become a starter. I think he's in the rotation next year. But I think it goes to Alex Howard. I think he's been in college the longest. He's had the most productivity at the college level coming from Youngstown State. He brings a nice senior veteran presence to this defense. He only has 1 year of eligibility left, I believe. I think he has 1 year as a leader on this defense, and I think he makes a huge impact in his short time at A&M. I think the future of the linebacker position looks much better than maybe it just does in the next season. I think for years to come, you have a great rotation of linebackers, but you need some experience to permeate that locker room. You need some playing time for other guys, because last year you had a really tight rotation. You had Chris Russell, you had Edge Cooper, you had Torrin York. That's all we really saw on Saturdays. So I need to see some other guys. I think we're going to see a deeper rotation at linebacker. All those guys I mentioned, I think they all play. I think maybe some of them are in mop-up duty, but I think they make an effort to play all those guys. I think a Scooby Williams and a Damian Sanford might be able to enter the rotation series to series. So if I had to bet right now, I'd say Alex Howard starting at the other linebacker position. Seniority, leadership, physicality, experience. All right, and now in the defensive back room, obviously we have a bit of a giant question mark at corner. You can see all the names I have listed there. It's just a mess of names. Same thing goes for safety and nickel, but I am pretty confident that Bryce Anderson, Jacoby Matthews, and Dalton Brooks will be starting at safety and nickel, maybe moving around throughout the duration of the early part of the year. I think they're the starters in spring. I think it makes sense. They've both played. They both had a ton of experience. I would not be surprised at all if DeRicky Wright takes playing time from Jacoby or Dalton. I think DeRicky Wright is a versatile, solid, physical player out of Vandy who's ready to take things to the next level in his college career. I would be shocked if they don't find ways to get this giant 6'4" physical safety maybe playing nickel, maybe playing closer to the line of scrimmage, moving him around, at some points throughout the season. And then, of course, Jared Kerr, he played a lot last year. I thought he showed some promise. I think he fits into this rotation somehow. I doubt he's the starter. Just keep his name on your radar as a potential starter, maybe if he takes that next step. But there's a chance that he becomes the odd man out. Maybe a transfer portal spring candidate if things don't work in his favor. Kind of a swing player there. I like Jared Kerr, so keep an eye on him too. But like I said, if I had to guess, I think Bryce Anderson has star potential. I think Jacoby Matthews showed enough. I think a year of starting under his belt. And I think Dalton Brooks got better and better throughout the year. His freshman year, we saw him play throughout the year, maybe in sub packages, in just deep rotation stuff. And then we saw him in mop-up duty. And we saw him late in the year. He played the whole bowl game. He had an interception in the game. He was a really good player. He graded really well in that game. I think Dalton Brooks projects as a starter next year. And in spring specifically. But you never know. All right. This is the big one, guys. This is the one where we really don't know what the hell's going on. We know there's a bunch of names here. We know there's a lot of potential here. I could talk for maybe 30 minutes about corner, and I will, but I won't. I could talk a long time about corner, so I guess I'll say this. I am not confident in any single player in this room yet. I am not confident that Texas A&M will trot out star corners or high-level corners next year. I am confident that this battle will make them all better. I am confident that we are going to see the cream rise to the top within a position group battle. So right now, I need to see it. I need to see this corner room go out there and play. But you have such a damn good chance of cultivating and formulating and finding diamonds in this rich rock nugget that you could just go and pickaxe at, and you're going to find some diamonds in here. I think there's some diamonds in this rough. And now if I had to guess, Tyreek Chappelle just got announced to be returning to Texas A&M. I think Chappelle's a starter. I've never had an issue with Tyreek Chappelle as a starter at Texas A&M. Y'all remember when he first started like 3-4 years ago? He went in for Miles Jones, who got hurt versus Arkansas, and Treylon Burke just put it on Tyreek Chappelle. They were just isolating him on the long side of the field. Him and Burke, that's it. And he was just eating them up. But since then, Tyreek Chappelle has been a guy that you kind of don't notice on the field in a good way. That's a compliment for a corner. I like a corner that doesn't get mentioned a lot in a football game, and I think that's Tyreek Chappelle for the most part. Of course, he got burned a couple of times last year, but we had issues across the board in the secondary last year. Maybe some safety issues there. I don't know. But he did get burned a couple times. I think he gives you a great chance of being a great player, of being a solid corner room. Now, if I had to guess who the other starter was, you don't have a returning starter coming back besides Chappelle. I'm going to go with the blanket Will Lee. He's a bigger corner. He's a very experienced corner. He's the kind of guy that Elko would probably handpick if he could, and he did. So I have Will Lee as the other starter. But, dude, I am not confident at all in that. You have Des Ricks, who I think was the #1 cornerback last season's recruiting cycle. Didn't play in his first year at Bama. Had talent in front of him. BJ Mays, a guy who has only improved over the course of his college career. Started at Incarnate Word, moved up to UAB. Now he's taken the next step into Texas A&M. Jaden Hill, the versatile transfer out of Florida. Donovan Sanders out of Cal Poly, very sought after in this transfer cycle. Another big guy, another guy who played safety but was eventually moved to corner. A guy that can play all over the place but maybe projects as a corner now. Bobby Taylor, who's been around forever. Wouldn't we love to see Bobby make it into some playing time? Sam McCall, who we saw play a lot last year. You have so many options at corner. That's why I say I'm not confident that there's like one star out there. I don't know who the hell it is. But I am confident that they figure it the hell out. This is too good of a room for you at least not to get decent cornerback play. If last year was bad cornerback play, unless you had Chappelle and Harmon out, which that duo was only out there together for like 3 games, and the defense did fine in those 3 games. It was an issue last year. Next year, it's at least going to be average. I'm confident in that, even though I don't know who the names are. So I'm going to guess Tyreek Chappelle and Will the Blanket Lee. That's my best guess, and I'm sticking to it. So, guys, that is my starting 11 for both sides of the ball in spring. That's my guess. That's my prediction. Where would you correct this? Where would you differ from what I project? I think I kept things pretty to the book. Of course, on offense, very straightforward. A lot of returning pieces. A lot of guys who were not only returning players on the team, but returning players on the field. To most, the offensive issue last year was not with the players necessarily. It was with regression on the offensive line, which we put on the coaching staff. These are young players who have shown promise before. You put it on coaching when you don't see it progress forward. With scheme, with tempo, with play calling. Those things are all going to improve in 2024, and you have more experience now. I'm excited about this offense. Defense, while I am excited about it, you see a bunch of new names out there. Obviously, the coaching staff is new too. A lot of new. So much new. That can be hard to adjust to in 1 year. So right now, I'm leaning to a super high variance type of prediction for 2024. I keep saying this, and I'll say it time and time again. I see 12 wins on the schedule next year. I also see 6 possible losses based on what we know about this team going into next year. But this is my projected starters right now. We're going to get a lot of info in spring. We're going to get a lot of info leading up to spring. I'm excited to cover it. I'm excited to watch it, take part in it. But guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you're enjoying Aggie baseball, by the way. What a hell of an opening weekend. Braden Montgomery, welcome to Aggieland. Aggieland, welcome to Braden Montgomery. Let's have some fun with this offseason. Let's enjoy Aggie baseball. Let's enjoy you doing what you do in this offseason. And I'll see you guys real soon. I'll see you guys in the live show, 8 p.m. Thursday. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Gig 'em.